Just even in my life, I tried to just do everything the most efficient way possible.
Because the key now is like you've got to that level, and that's awesome. Let's keep you here.
In Counter-Strike, so many of the things are in the timing, right? Sometimes 1 second is way too much.
Because I feel like some of my persona in Counter-Strike changed who I was as a person.
Oh, what? Jumping double for gold!
Hello ladies and gents, today we are talking with Sliggy. Now Sliggy is someone that, if you're familiar with CSGO, you'll probably have seen his name many times, and it's not as talent per se, and it's definitely not as a player or a coach, but it is as an observer. And it's fair to say that he is the best observer in the business. Now we have many great observers, but there's none that have pushed the envelope like he has. Now in this conversation, it was actually quite wide-ranging and quite long, and so I decided to split it up into two parts, as I felt it was very important to cover him in CSGO as well as him and his identity and what he's trying to accomplish in Valorant. So this is going to be a pretty long one if you listen to both of them, but I think it's definitely more than worthwhile. He's a guy that puts a huge amount of thought into everything that he does, and he is certainly an innovator, which certainly is going to contribute very effectively to his new discipline in coaching. And his team so far, Fish123, has been largely the most successful team in Europe, and surprisingly consists of mostly, well, I think Ardis left the roster. At the moment, he's not on the active roster, and it is just Ekis, Soulcast, Cryptus, and Link. But it is a fully British roster if you exclude Ardis. And that's pretty amazing for them to have found so much success. And I know that Sliggy is working tirelessly in trying to discover things and innovate in a game that is so fresh and has so much to discover. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Sliggy, whether you listen to the CSGO one or the Valorant one. Without further ado, Sliggy. All right, so I finally have the man himself, Sliggy, has joined me for the podcast. So thanks for making the time to talk with me, Connor. How's it going?
It's absolutely fine. It's the first time I've ever done one of these, Dan, so prepare yourself. I don't know how it's going to go. There's probably a reason why I've never done one before, but thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's really, I think you're a really important person to have on because generally speaking, I try to get, I'll have a lot of different guests for a lot of different reasons, but I feel like one of the most important things in esports is how we view the esport itself, and you're the person that tells the story ultimately, and that's kind of how people know you is as an observer. Generally speaking, of course you have quite a wealth of history going into competing yourself here and there, and just how long you've been around, but that is what you're mostly known for, and it's one of the most important jobs. Ultimately, it's you're less replaceable than the talent is in many respects, because there's very few observers, and the quality between the observers I feel like is pretty noticeable. So you have a unique skill set that you've made for yourself, and I feel like you have innovated, like you've taken it upon yourself to innovate as much as you can to be and to hold sort of effectively the I suppose the unofficial title of the best observer, and I think that's generally how people view you. So yeah, that's your introduction, and
that's quite an introduction.
Yeah.
I'll take it. I appreciate all the comments, man. It's something that I thought I kind of did it at the time, like my first ever event. It was kind of like thrown upon me. I did it. I wasn't really expecting to be. It turned into like a weird obsession in the end. It turned into like a little game in itself, essentially. That honestly I spent so much time into, and kind of just treated it like a game. Really, I just wanted to get better. So yeah, it's an interesting one. It's definitely not where I essentially saw myself. It's not what I saw myself doing. But I'm so happy it's happened. And yeah, it's one of those jobs where you're kind of in the background. Really, you're not really noticed. So any kind of appreciation that people give you is really nice to hear.
Yeah, it's interesting because in different esports, like I guess if we kind of think like what the big ones are, you've got mostly a situation where it is fairly easy to direct the action, and you can pretty much, to a certain extent, code it if you want. You can get an algorithm to kind of do it, and you can make the argument that you could do that for CSGO as well. But I feel like it would be more difficult to actually do a good job with that. But if you have a game like, well, if you have a fighting game, obviously you don't need an observer for a fighting game. All of the information is on the screen at all times, and so there's no camera work required there. When it comes to something like StarCraft, it's a little bit more nuanced. You do have to have somebody who knows the game, knows the important moments, knows when it's there's a player that's making an information play, or there's like a certain bit of tech at a timing that's particularly important. So they have to know the game pretty well. But I feel like there is still a lot more flexibility and room for error, because in a game like StarCraft, it is a 1 versus 1 game. So the focus is, it's pretty easy to know where the focus should be if you know your stuff. But I feel like with CSGO, one of the big differences is that there are a lot of different decisions as to what you can choose to observe. And we understand that telling the story is very different from just showing the frags. So your job is pretty difficult, because it's divided between 10 perspectives at any given moment, and you have to figure out how you best tell that story. So what were some of, I think, what were some of the reasons why, or let's say, this is a better way to frame the question, what were some of the initial things that you thought was people were not doing properly with observing that you set out to do better?
So yeah, essentially, like before, like I'd watch like majors and stuff. I used to watch kind of when I started out doing observing, and honestly, it was all just frag captures. Like everyone was just trying to, and I saw a lot of TOs were like talking about the amount of frags captured was like the main thing. Whereas I kind of felt like what was getting lost is the amount of time that all of these players and all of these teams are putting into the actual strategy of the game. Like obviously there's so much utility in Counter-Strike. I just felt that we weren't seeing the actual strategy that was involved, or like we were only kind of getting like 50% of the game really. Like you were getting the kills, but you wouldn't see these people lining up the smokes, like the flashes and all of like the hard work that all these teams have put all their time into. You weren't really seeing all of that. So I feel like the main thing that I tried to add was just kind of these overviews where you could essentially just see people setting up, and then you see the smokes land and stuff just for map control. I was more into like the utility side of things, and then trying to catch the kills as well. That was like my main goal, was just to kind of show all of the time these people were putting in. Just wanted to just show it all, really. These teams practice, especially now, they practice like 10 hours a day, maybe less, maybe more. It kind of depends. And they put so much time and thought into it all that I just wanted to just show it all, really. I felt like it was all, like it was only half a story.
And in that sense too, it's pretty interesting how I think there must be a huge degree of difficulty. Like I feel like you could really sink an unlimited amount of time into it, because what you're talking about, which is telling the story through the strategy and the utility usage and so on, which I think is when that stuff goes right, it does feel amazing. Like when you're watching around and you see all of that stuff come together, you feel like you kind of see. It's like a weird feeling. It's like a feeling where you are very connected to all of the most important things. Like the story it's like a picture book almost. Like you just see what's on the screen, and you just understand the story. Like even if you're let's say a beginner, if the cameras are done well with good timings and so on, you can see the nades set up, you can see that the team's trying to take over an area, you can see the how a team is investing to do that, and then how the other team's setting up to contest that, and how the tactics that they might run to contest that looks like. It all comes together so nicely. And I feel like it's the opposite of that, is like this complete disconnection as to what you're viewing on the screen. It doesn't tell anything towards the story at all. But to be able to tell the story in this way that you're describing, that was your goal, and I think you achieved very well, is you have to have so much game knowledge. You have to have so much knowledge of the teams and the matchup as well. And so there's like an unlimited amount of time you could sink into doing that if you wanted. So giving yourself, finding yourself in this position where you have to do your best in understanding what the teams are trying to do, and understanding how to analyze the games as they're happening, as well as having the knowledge going into the games to know ahead of time what to kind of watch. How would you describe yourself as someone that's an analyst? Like, where did your analytical capabilities come from? Because this is definitely probably the most important skill set, is being able to read the game.
Yeah, so essentially, like I was a player and I tried to be an in-game leader, so I have a bit of backing from that. But honestly, when like that was all in source, really, when CS:GO came around, I honestly watched so much Counter Strike. Like I'd say I definitely have over 10,000 hours of watched CS, like just pure just watching games and just watching, observing, and just watching like teams do all the tactics and stuff they've been practicing for so long. So it was a lot of time of honestly just watching all of the teams and then just kind of judging like where my camera should be on that stuff. It definitely helped with Astralis like coming in. I think I came into it at a good point where Astralis were really doing like double nades was a really big meta that they just started doing. So like and overviews and stuff, it was just so much more impactful to capture it all. And then like you're saying, like CS is just it's there's so many, like a miss smoke can just change around, like, and even just like a smoke that's just like a few pixels off can change around. So you kind of want to catch as much information as that as possible. So yeah, I was essentially just watching a lot of games and kind of just in my head just taking mental notes of like what should you be showing like now, like what's important right now. Is this kill the most important, or is like this utility more important, or is this flank more important, and just kind of weighing up all of the percentages really in my head and just trying to tell the story as best I can, because it is manic. There's a lot of stuff going on. Like there's 10 players and a lot of utility. So you are pretty much just weighing up numbers in your head of just what, like, how is this round going to play out, and what's the best way to show it. And I guess overviews capture so much that I just felt it was essential and something that wasn't really being used. So I feel like that was kind of my impact within CS:GO. I feel like I Rushly, like one of the other observers, messaged me after the major to saying like he felt that like I raised the bar essentially in just how observing is done, and like that was the new way that observing had to be done, like after the majors. So it felt good that it was kind of like getting noticed, and the people were just seeing the kind of hard work that I put in. I guess I learned, like, if you think of all of the overviews that I had, like I was going through demos, and then I was going through just live matches, just being like, this is a common nade spot, this is a common smoke spot. And then I had about 20, let me count my thing, 12, 20, I had about 28 overviews, like just pure shortcuts to overviews and maps on 7 different maps. So it's like 200, just under 200 shortcuts on each map. So like I proper went in, I proper went hard for it all. And I just kind of wanted to my main goal was to put in as much time as these people had put in. Essentially, like all these teams have put in so much time, I felt like I should put in as much time and just try and make the viewers' experience as good as it can be.
So I mean, before this kind of started to happen for you, as you mentioned, you actually said something that may startle a lot of people because you said you had like 10,000 hours of just watched Counter-Strike, let alone any of your experience playing various iterations of Counter-Strike. What would you say really motivated you or encouraged you to spend so much time doing that?
I just wanted to, like, first of all, as a player, I wanted to improve. I did originally want to be like a coach for teams, so that was like a good way of me trying to do it. Like when I was less known, I wanted to be like a coach, so I would just try and watch people's strategy. And honestly, I just enjoyed it as a spectator sport. Like I really just enjoyed just the game itself and how different every game is, and just how it was just ever evolving. It was just awesome to just see, especially like 3-4 years ago, where just people were just coming up with brand new stuff, and it was just awesome to just see new stuff. So yeah, I guess yeah, it was just mainly, I guess, just my drive of wanting to be a coach before I found the observing stuff, and then mixed in with then finding out about observing, and then just wanting to improve, like, personally on that stuff.
So, given that you mentioned that, Rush, as he messaged you after you observed the major, and it's the first time I believe that you observed the major. That's firstly, observing a major, that had to be quite a milestone, had to be one of the biggest goals. Correct me if I'm wrong, but having also that validation from one of your peers, essentially, that you are effectively, you raised the bar, you were pushing the envelope, you were the innovator in this field where there's not a huge amount of people that are actually working to innovate, and that you've kind of, that was like a representation, like a manifestation in the world, something that's tangible that you could show everybody. It's like, look at this, is all my hard work. Was that like a crowning achievement that you still look back to, or do you feel like there's still a lot more to achieve and a lot more to do? How did that whole experience like leave you feeling? Like, because it must have been a milestone experience for you.
Yeah, it was. Like emotionally for me, it was something that I was heavily invested into. I kind of used ECS as like my training ground, essentially. Like it was big, but it wasn't major big. So I was using ECS to just perfect my skills, I guess, and just try and learn like all of the binds and just change up my config and stuff to make it as good as I can. And then when Faceit got offered the major, that was the major and the minor. That was like, I felt like that was my chance. I was essentially offered another, if I wanted another observer to do the same major with me. Obviously, it was a lot of time. It was a lot of broadcast time, like I guess averaged about 10 hours a day, especially in the minor. But I really just, with observing, it's you can have a good game or you can have a bad game. Like things, again, it's all percentages, right? So stuff can go your way and stuff can go the opposite way. So you can have good games and bad games. And I guess I was just wanting to increase the amount of percentage that I could just show all of my stuff. And just hoping for like that really good game where people notice it, because it's often something that is in the background. So I was just trying to, I just wanted to just do it all. God knows how many hours I did. I was doing like, the minor was pretty crazy. The minor had a lot of overtime, so I guess I was doing like 12 hours a day and stuff at one point. But I was just running on pure adrenaline. Like I felt like this was my chance to kind of prove that this was the way it should be done, essentially. So yeah, it was, and then obviously the feedback, like you said, was kind of mind blowing. Like I used to get feedback from at least like the internal guys, like yourself, and then like Sponge, Henry, of course. Like everyone would say it's really good, but actually like having other people notice it outside of the game, yeah, it was pretty overwhelming. It was like a really good milestone for me. I was really happy. In terms of it progressing further, I'm not too sure. Like I think there are ways to improve it. Obviously, I'm an advocate of the 5-second delay that I think that would make CS better, but I'm not sure in terms of live observing. I'm not sure much more could be done. I like a lot of ESL stuff is pretty good recently. Rushley's doing a great job again. I just think he's pretty much raising the bar once again with like his kind of cinematic camps. He's learned so many camps for all of these maps. It's impressive. So yeah, I'm not sure that it can go too much further in the circumstances at the moment. I think it's almost got to the max it can get, I think, unless something more was added.
And that more would be that delay that you've been advocating for. Do you want to tell people about that, given that some of the listeners may not be aware of this idea? And I know it's something that you put on Reddit. You did a lot of very detailed tweets and posts about this, but it has been a while, I think, since this stuff was sort of in discussion. So yeah, for the people that haven't heard about it before, if you could give a quick overview of it.
Sure, it can be a little bit controversial. So, but the main premises of it is essentially you have the live arena setting, which is all live. Like you have a live stream, no delays, and all the crowd that are in-house see it all live. And then you have the Twitch or YouTube or wherever it's broadcasting. You have that feed on a 5-second delay with crowd noise, 5-second delayed as well. And basically the premises of that is that you kind of get perfect observing. So you have the same crowd reaction, but everyone online is just 5 seconds behind the actual action. Obviously, all the cameras are all delayed from all the players and like their reactions, so it's all seamless online. You actually don't really realize it's happening in a delay, but essentially, yeah, the observing is done in a 5-second delay, and the whole the whole premise is you see everything that's important within that round. It's definitely something that hasn't been. I mean, it's been tried, but I think it's been done wrong. I think it needs the right people behind it. But yeah, essentially 5 seconds to just capture like pop flashes, a miss smoke, like everything 100%, like important kills. It just kind of, all of those percentages that you're weighing up in your head, like it's just the reassurance of, okay, this is what happens. And the observer has 5 seconds from real time to the delay to decide what is the best to show for all the spectators watching.
I mean, for me personally, I definitely would love to see that tried, because it seems like the correct evolution, and it doesn't. There's already like a delay. If you're watching on Twitch or something, there's going to be a delay because the data has to get sent to you through the servers and everything. So there's, stuff can be close. I mean, that delay has been diminished pretty massively as to how it used to be, but there's still a delay that exists, and as you say, it doesn't really change the experience for the people online. So. Yeah, I agree. Like, I feel like if there's a way to make sure that this system works and doesn't fail, it just sounds better. It just sounds like it will elevate the esport, and that's actually really important too, because the more compelling CS:GO is to watch, the longer it's going to be relevant and stick around, and that's pretty important, especially given some of the stuff we'll be talking about later, which is we'll be doing we'll be talking a lot about Valorant later on, and Valorant's definitely a game where I feel like they're not afraid to actually do a lot of the things that could improve CS, but CS is I don't say CS is very stuck in its ways, because I feel like generally speaking, it's almost a universal constant that we tend to want to stay in the kind of comfort zone of what we're used to. So it's not really a knock on CS per se, but that's like what's difficult about it. It's really hard to change things that people are used to. It's super hard. There's so much resistance. I think actually one thing on this very note, which I think makes a lot of sense, that I want to get your 2 cents on actually, is MR12. This is a big one, because there's a lot of arguments for it. I think that there's actually an overwhelming amount of arguments for something like MR12. Like, but where do you stand on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because obviously, in Source we had MR12 for a lot of time, so I'm fine with it, but I very much know that everyone within this community hates change. Like, everyone hates change. It's just the way that we are. We hate change, but honestly, sometimes we have to see it to kind of believe it and understand it. MR12, you just kind of have to look at how long a best of 3 takes, and it's a long time. Like, in comparison to just general sports and stuff, it's a long time, like with breaks and everything in between, and especially if they go to overtime, it can, like, best of 3s can last between 4 to 5 hours, and that is a lot of time. So I'm not completely against it. I do, like I was kind of said in that Reddit thread that I did, I do want to see, like, just an event that just essentially just tries everything. We feel like, obviously, we all, like, again, like I was saying, is we're not really up for change, but just having like this one event that just tries so many things, just tries MR12, tries like the delayed observing, and just, like, esports is still so new, it's still so fresh, everything's ever evolving. Just to have like this one-off event where we just try loads of stuff and just look at all the feedback from players, spectators, just everyone involved, and be like, and just look at the bad and good points, and, like, to say that we have it completely perfect right now is a lie. Like, for sure, it's a lie. But it's just what we're used to and just comfortable with. So, yeah, I'm down to try MR12 for sure. I think games are too long right now. I'm not sure how it would work with the current money system in CS:GO. But then again, that's just something that we can edit as well. But why not try it? Like, we actually have nothing to lose. Like, all we're doing is like prolonging the evolution of it all. If we can get the perfect format, then, but like, we need to try stuff for that to happen, essentially. And it's not perfect. You can't have a best of 3 that lasts 5 hours for, like, it's just too long.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting too, because I feel like people kind of ignore the fact that, like, there's been, so if you have MR15 where you're talking about the balance of the game is at maybe like like it's at the 1.6 level, where the economy is extremely punishing. You have to do like a lot more like hard ecos, where you're like full eco for 2 rounds, and you don't really have a chance to win those rounds. It's really hard to win those rounds. That used to be the case in CSGO. It used to be very difficult. Wouldn't be quite as bad as 1.6, but still very difficult. If you're behind economically, the economic reset could be super brutal to be on the receiving end of. But the economy's changed enormously. Like, it's so you can buy pretty much every round, even if you want to, and all of the weapons are way better. Like the guns that are cheap now, in addition to already kind of the Deagle, which was always really good. You have a lot. Like, you have like these SMGs, like the MP9 is just ridiculous, $1,200, and it's so good. I actually think it should be nerfed because I think it's way too good for the price point. But even still, like if you pay a little bit of extra, you get a UMP, and even though that got nerfed, that's still so good. If you compare it to like a UMP 1.6, it's so good. And so you have so many more opportunities to actually do stuff, and the economy was also changed so that it's less punishing in general. And you get that extra money if you lose that first round. You get to start at the second loss bonus and all of this kind of stuff. And it feels like all that stuff has changed, but the way that we do the rule sets around it hasn't changed. And I feel like the whole purpose of having MR15 is so that if there's going to be like variance in the game, like maybe you'll get unlucky. There'll be like timings that, there's just some things in CSGO that even the best team in the world, won't be able to control. There's just some variance that exists. But as long as you have enough rounds to play that variance is mitigated and the best team can always win, then you have a game that has like competitive integrity. And I feel like, we have this rule set that's kind of developed for a game that's really punishing with regards to the economy and wants to give you more rounds to have more chances to get back if you're the better team. But in reality, like all that stuff is way less punishing, and we just never change the amount of rounds that you have. So now I feel like we're just artificially extending the game. That's kind of like I guess where I stand on it. But as you say, we've got to try it out.
This is what I mean. We have nothing to lose. Like worst case scenario, we tried this stuff out and we just go, oh, okay, that like it wasn't as good or it didn't work. But like we have no harm in trying. We just need these kind of I don't know what TO is going to do it, but we just need like a tournament organizer to just buy a bullet and just go, hey, this is the event where we try loads of stuff and we try to progress it all. Because like you said, yeah, like some of the guns now is like it has all evolved. It's the only thing that hasn't is the actual format of MR15. I mean, I'm like for sure no one knows the right answer. So it's just worth trying in my mind. But it's easier said than done, right? No one wants to take the risk essentially.
It's really interesting too because I feel like you would be looking for like a Maverick TO or a standalone event, and it seems like in the current climate we're going to get less just like pop-up events, whereas like maybe a one-off, some company that does other esports stuff and just does we're going to do a CSGO thing now, but they don't necessarily have consistency behind their CSGO enterprises. Like those definitely seem like companies that could use a gimmick or could use the timing whereby there's, let's say, controversy around whether or not this should be tested, and then that would be like the perfect moment. Like you get more eyeballs on your tournament, and given that you have no brands, that's got an extended value in CSGO, would be the perfect kind of storm to like bring up a tournament like that. But unfortunately, I don't think we really are going to have any of those pop-up tournaments because of the current economic conditions. So those kinds of people are like priced out, I think, of CSGO events. And then if you look at, who was like a Maverick TO, who's a Maverick type of organizer that exists in the ecosystem right now that's willing to put on stuff, there's not that many really. I feel like Blast initially, but now Blast is kind of trying to do more of a straight up, very standard broadcast and just do it really exceptionally well, which they're achieving. So hats off to them for that. But I didn't see them taking that risk. And yeah, that's it really. I don't really see anybody who's kind of like a Maverick in that sense. ESL always play it by the book, generally speaking. And with Flashpoint maybe, but I'm not sure. And I also don't know whether the Players Union stands on this, because obviously they also have some power in determining some of the rule sets and structures. And they could definitely, if they wanted it, then they could make a case for it, I'm sure. And that then there would be more of a likelihood that it could actually come together. But interestingly, it's actually in the interest of TOs to do this, because shorter broadcast days means that you may have to pay less overtime to any crews that you may be hiring. And also it means that you can get more games in a shorter period of time. And each event day is extremely expensive in terms of people's day rates, having the arena for, just the venue itself, and just all of the, costs that go with that is really expensive. So if you can find ways to cut down the amount of time that the game takes place, I feel like you're winning. So I feel like TOs are incentivized to try it, but it just hasn't come together yet. And I guess COVID is only going to kind of extend that. And now that we're into the world of online CS.
Yeah, everyone's just trying to get their online broadcast to the best they can be right now. So I guess it's not really on people's to-do list. But yeah, I do think you're definitely right. Also, people just don't understand how much these events used to, like, obviously because there's not many offline events anymore, but like how much it used to cost, like you were saying, like actual day rates for running costs for an event is just crazy, especially being in production, to see how many people are kind of behind the scenes, like, and especially people on Reddit just have no idea of the actual cost of all this. So yeah, anything to kind of shorten it in the long term is definitely good. Plus, like, it's the shorter it is, the more like sellable it is. I'm not sure what TO's like targeting TV and stuff like that, but obviously there's still a lot of money in TV and stuff like that. So like targeting that is definitely worth doing. And the shorter it is, if you can kind of ensure that a game is under an hour, it's a lot more sellable.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And it's also interesting too, in terms of, how, like, I don't actually really understand at this point sort of where we stand in terms of like how valuable TV viewership is and broadcast rights and so on, like who is most incentivized to or who will find the broadcast rights most valuable for their audience. I really don't know a lot about that stuff. Obviously, broadcast rights is definitely where you make the money back, and generally speaking, so it's an interesting one. It'd be curious to see how things evolve. But as I mentioned just a moment ago, we are in the COVID times right now, and everything's still on lockdown as of the recording of this. And we've been, unfortunately, because of this, we are stuck with just lots of online CS. I mean, fortunately, we are able to still kind of have a scene and have an esport because of the nature of this. It's on a digital arena as opposed to something physical like a football pitch or something. But still, there is an impact on the games. Like, is CS just really shit right now? Like, what? Obviously, we're getting a lot of crazy results, and you can put that down to a lot of different factors. The online factor, maybe the online factor hurts the really good teams more than it hurts the teams that are, let's say, for lack of a better term, like try-harding because they're hungry to prove themselves. But for the guys who are wanting to play on a stage and want a more legitimate place to kind of perform to their best ability as professionals, they want to be on a stage, they want to be traveling to an event, they want to have that environment to perform their best. Playing from their bedroom is not going to really do it for a person that's won loads of championships and lifted a lot of trophies. Playing from your bedroom is going backwards. So there's definitely impacts on the competitive integrity. But how do you weigh it up? Like, when you're watching all of these matches, like, what are your thoughts when you're watching CS right now?
It's just mental state, right? I think that I'm like, me in Source is a perfect example of this. Like, online, I was unreal. Like, I was like, I felt like I was one of the best. I felt like I could do anything. I felt like I was literally, without a doubt, like, I pressed tab and I just felt like I was the best player on the server. When it gets to LAN and there's that much pressure and there's people behind me, like, I was such a crumbler. I was such a bot. I was like the biggest example of an onliner you could get back in Source. So for me, like, all these online results, I imagine the mental state of all of these people, of all like the pros who have been to all these lands with literally just like hundreds of thousand people in front of them when it is like the most precious situation. I completely understand how the mentality's not going to be the same as like a 16-year-old up-and-comer who can win all this money that is probably life-changing to them online, and they are in the comfort of their of their bedroom. It's such a big mental state, honestly, for players, just being online and not having the pressure of that. Like, the pressure from that is, it's so big. Honestly, it is so big. Just pressing like tab and just seeing how many people are viewing, like those numbers in your head, like it's crazy. Whereas now I don't know, there just isn't pressure online, so that's why you get so many just I don't know, just random, I guess is probably the best way to say it, results. And all these teams, it must be hard for all these top teams because honestly, like when you're going up against people that maybe haven't heard of, it's so hard to have the right mentality to treat it like a proper game online. But yeah, I think I don't know. I don't want to say it's stale at the moment with all this online games because it's great that we can still work and thrive within the current situation. But for me, as like a hardcore like viewer slash player, I do miss it, and I imagine all of the top pros right now are really missing it as well. I'm just it just doesn't have the same, like for me, just doesn't have the same appeal or the same feel as offline. So yeah, I'm missing it for sure.
I do wonder if it's going to be a little bit like the Krakow major, where no one, as soon as that finals finished, and you've already got this crazy finals, that's like Gambit versus the Immortals lineup that then imploded immediately afterwards, and then Gambit, obviously that lineup kind of imploded somewhat afterwards as well. It felt like immediately after that finals happened, that there was this unspoken agreement that everyone would just not consider this major as really all that relevant afterwards. I wonder, do you think that we're going to feel that the same way once this period is over and we're hopefully back to normalcy, and we have LAN events going on again? Do you feel like the teams that did really well, even if some of them are the top teams, do you think that the results will just sort of be discounted completely and people just won't really, they won't really think about them?
Yeah, I mean for sure. Like I think no matter like people, I mean there's an argument for and against, but in my eyes, it has to be taken with a pinch of salt. It really does. It's just such a different situation, and I think a lot of the people watching just kind of forget that. Like they'll really overhype like the result of an online game, but honestly, until you've like been there and seen the difference between online and like LAN and the pressure, it's just a different world. So yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what's going to happen with this major that's coming up. Personally, I wouldn't have done that. I would have waited. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's going to happen with it because, in theory, it's just going to be an online major for 2 million, right? Obviously, and I'm just seeing it how it is. I can't imagine it's going to go any other way with the current situation. So yeah, I think people are just going to look at it and just like it's going to be good. It's awesome. It's something to watch, right? It's a bit of entertainment when people need it. It's like that in that sense, it's absolutely awesome. But in terms of like competition and what we're used to, I don't know. I would have preferred something different personally. I would have done like a standalone online major, just accepted it for what it was and just had it completely to standalone from the original majors because it's just not gonna feel the same. I'm not sure. In my books, personally, I'm not gonna really class it as a proper major if it's online.
Yeah, it's gonna be very interesting to see how it all plays out. Hopefully everything again does return to normalcy soon enough, so we don't have to find out what this looks like past 2020. But yeah, fingers crossed. I guess last thoughts on CS:GO before we kind of talk about Valorant, in which the gamers which you've been putting a lot of your efforts into, and also for those who may not be necessarily directly interested in Valorant. One quick thing that I will be talking to Connor about is the fact that he was or is seemingly able to actually achieve that goal of coaching. So and we'll talk a lot about that in a moment. But before we do get into that, what is your like if you just ignore that this COVID situation happens and we assume that CS:GO is kind of trundling along as it was, what's your interpretation of the way the ecosystem was developing? And just to kind of color it a little bit for people listening, we have this kind of war almost between the big leagues. You got Flashpoint Blast and ESL, and it was the battle became particularly polarizing towards the end of 2019, when I think we had one of the sort of spokespersons of the league, Thorin, he was starting to ramp up the tensions a little bit with the narratives and sort of the back and forth between him and ESL publicly, and then it felt like things did change a little bit in terms of the whole landscape. And on top of that, Star Series, it doesn't really seem like they're necessarily a player that has a seat at the table right now, due to, I think, the some of the previous events were quite difficult for them. So I think that they're not going to be as invested in CS. At least that's what I think is happening. I don't have any conclusive evidence of this, but right now the big players seem to be Flashpoint, Blast, and ESL. So there's just a little bit of color for you. So yeah. So what is your interpretation of the way things have been moving?
I was actually originally, when I was under the impression that the teams were kind of going to be half and half split between, like, I'll put Blast to the side for a second, like ESL and Flashpoint. I was pretty sure, or like the rumors that were going around was it was going to be a half and half split of like the top teams, like the top 20 were going to be like half and half ESL, half Flashpoint. And for me, I was actually kind of in for it. Like I felt like it would make the majors like twice a year a lot more appealing, and the kind of the downtime, I just felt like we were always seeing like this team against this team, this team against this team. So when it came to like a major, it wasn't as big a thing. But if you had like Astralis, for example, and like a Na'Vi or a Liquid like split up, and then you hadn't seen these guys play off for each other for a long time. Like obviously one would be in Flashpoint, for example, and one would be in ESL. I think the hype around that major and these two teams like fighting off against each other that hasn't been seen for ages would have been an awesome story. I think it actually would have been really good for CSGO if that happened. Obviously, it didn't pan out that way. So I mean, I'm not too sure where it's all going with Flashpoint. Obviously, it's all a bit of unknown, right? I imagine there's a lot of roster changes that will be happening. There's a lot of talk going around that I'm not sure. I just kind of just waiting to see it evolve, really. But I mean, the idea of having all these top teams split up into different tournaments, honestly, I'm down for it. I think it's just more of a storyline, right? When it comes to these majors where the most eyes are on CS, it's just more of a talking point. And then these kind of in between periods, everyone just does their own thing and plays these tournaments. And then, I really think Blast have owned it, man. Like, I'm really impressed with just everything they do. Their production is just top level. I go ahead and just say that at least like the Blast London, like that event was the best CSGO event outside of a major I've ever watched. It was incredible, just production wise and just team wise. These guys have just kind of just somehow avoided all of the confliction and just got all the best teams and produced the best like content that I've seen. So yeah, it's still all up in the air, really, isn't it? With what's going to happen. So yeah, I'm not too sure. I guess we'll see when everything goes back to more of the norm what happens. But yeah, I still feel like it's all up in the air, really. Like nothing's really set in stone. Obviously, everything's changing. Team lineups always keeping changing. But in terms of actual top teams being split between tournaments, I'm fine with it. Like as long as you have a major twice a year and these teams get to play against each other, like that's cool.
Yeah, it's kind of reminiscent of how in the old days we would have things would be more regional. You know, you'd have, let's say the CIS region would be extremely insular, and part of the reason would be because there are less tournaments. So there's lots of teams in that region, though, but none of them really had the means economically, financially, to actually go to tournaments unless they were like one or two sponsored teams. But they could maybe go to some of the local events, and so you'd have like this really strong scene that was developing that wasn't really like the world wasn't really privy to it unless you were part of that region. And then you get some of the best teams from that region, maybe like a WCG or something, some really big tournament would come along, and there would be these teams then interacting with teams from another region, like North America, or even other teams in Europe. Like the Russian scene used to be extremely, I would say, it didn't really intersect at all with the like different communities regionally in Europe, and even within Europe, like Poland would have its own like very strong scene. France, Sweden, like all these countries would have very strong identities in terms of how they would play, and it'd be always super interesting to see the really big tournaments, like maybe like just like a handful of times a year when you see like the melting pot, the only time when all of these teams come together to really see who can play the best, what styles work the best. They don't really have the information to study one another, and so it was always super interesting. And I do feel like that's something that's been missing. So I'm kind of with you on that. The fact that you can have a unifying event that really is the World Cup type situation, the Champions League, as opposed to something that's a bit more regional. And I think that that would be a great step forwards. I really don't know where things are going to go though from here, because it seemed like there is definitely almost an arms race between Blast, Flashpoint, and ESL because everyone wants to kind of win and have the best CS:GO product, and to continue to get investment to keep doing that. And it's expensive, like you were alluding to. It's really expensive, and I really fear that it's too expensive that all three parties can survive for a prolonged period of time. It feels like someone's going to have to kind of throw the towel in at some point. And on top of that, we haven't really talked about the direction from the developers and Valve, who it's hard to ever read what they're doing. We don't really know why they act in the ways in which they act sometimes when it comes to an update or whatever it might be, or like overturning a rule that they used to have. Like, it is always very unclear why they make decisions in the way that they do. Is there something that you would like to see them do to maybe make the world or the CS:GO world better?
I mean, yeah, Valve are just an odd one, right? Like the most recent thing where like they'll fix the Krieg, but then just throw in like, oh, by the way, like the Deagle's accurate midair now. Like, I don't know. I feel like they mess up the game and then fix that bit that they messed up to make it look like they're doing a job. Like, they create more work for themselves, I swear, just to make it look like they're doing a job. I don't know. I have quite strong opinions on Valve. I don't really like how they've treated it all within the last like 3 to 5 years. Like, it's like, and only now, since there's like a competitor, do they actually seem to be taking seriously. I mean, from a business point of view, like they've absolutely smashed it, right? I get it, like they've smashed it. But from people who like love the game and actually like careers rely on the game to get these updates, it's heartbreaking that they just don't put in the effort that is needed. But I mean, I'd love to see them just do more for the major, essentially. So like if these tournaments are, like we said, and they eventually get to the point where like teams are split more, then having like a big major where the prize money is giant, and I don't know, like they make so much money off the skins, right? That I would love to see some kind of compendium, kind of similar to a Dota thing, where we get like an esports case and that goes to the prize pool, even if it has a cap on it, and they take the profit after it gets to like 2 million or something. But I just think I just always want more, essentially.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to have that feeling and reasonable to have that feeling when you see that obviously the company, the way the company's structured is that it's like each team working on each different game is kind of its own little company, as it were, and they're somewhat insulated in some respects from one another. And it's not like there's a company policy that covers all of their esports. So it's kind of understandable that even though it's Valve, it's still not Valve Dota or Valve whatever else. But with if we're looking at other esports scenes and we're seeing stuff that we want, it is kind of hard to. It's difficult, and especially because the esports case thing that you mentioned, it's something that they already did try that. So I'd be really interested to know why they didn't continue doing it, because we had it, I think, for some of the first majors, right? There was like a couple of esports cases. I can't even remember now.
Yeah, we had it. So we literally had it for the first two. There's esports case 1, esports case 2, and then I think maybe someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty confident they raised $250,000 for the prize pool of the major, and then stopped it there. Like, once it was capped, they just took the rest of the profits. I mean, the idea is awesome. Like, they literally had it. They had the idea there. The potential was there. Like, I kind of thought when the first majors were coming out, like, whoa, this is gonna get really big. Like, this is just like an endless prize pool. Like, with how much people are putting into skins and stuff, this is just an endless prize pool. Like, this is going to go to like the 2 millions, to 3 millions, like 5 millions. Like, I thought it was going to go really big. And maybe it was when they put the prize pool of like 1 million or like 500,000. I'm not entirely sure. They stopped it. So yeah, I'm not sure what went on there, but it would be massive. Like the potential of it would be massive. It'd be interesting to see if now Valorant's here, depending on what these guys do with prize pools for whatever their tournaments are going to be. Like maybe that's something that Valve have to fall back on. Yeah, it's just it's unknown at the moment. But yeah, we'll see. I was liking like the esports cases. I thought they were awesome. I thought it was a great idea. Obviously, it was more appealing for me to actually get skins because I knew it was going to a prize pool as well. So like as a player that's watching, I was like, oh, okay, well, like at least this is going to the players. Like at least some of it was going towards the players so they can win. So I don't know, that factor was pretty cool for me. So it was a shame that it disappeared.
It's kind of interesting. Like I would love to do like a deep dive on all of the numbers behind majors and so on, because there's almost this world where by like it actually like everyone's becomes priced out of even running a major, because we already know that generally speaking, running a major is a loss-making project for tournament organizers. That's been information that's been kind of out there for quite some time. Again, I don't know if there's ever been publicly available specific numbers, and I've never seen them publicly or privately. But there is that general sense that it is a loss-making project, and it seems to be quite consistent with some of the stuff that I hear every so often. And so, from what I understand, is that Valve provide less financial support than they used to. They used to again, I think it used to be the case that they would provide stuff like travel and accommodation and stuff, as well as the prize pool. But now it's just basically the prize pool, if I'm not mistaken. And there is a world where, again, like the TOs become priced out of being able to run a major. What happens when no TO can actually say, hey, by the way, let me rephrase it. What happens if there's no TO that can actually afford it and everyone just turns it down? And we're in a place where there's no one that's ready to take up the mantle. And so what then? What happens?
Yeah, I don't know. That's the crazy thing, right? And that's essentially where you kind of look at it and just go, like, are we in some kind of esports bubble, at least within CS? Yeah, it's I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I've heard exactly the same thing as what you've heard. That obviously, I'm not 100% sure if that's true, but yeah, it seems very hard to actually make this sustainable for the long term. So yeah, I don't really know what's going to happen in the future. It's scary. It does when you look at it that way. It does look like we are in a little bit of a bubble, especially with like team salaries and how much they're getting paid. It's obviously, again, I haven't got confirmed numbers, but some of the numbers that I do hear just seem ludicrous.
It's interesting too, because the people. So with Valorant, there's an idea that it may not be a locked down kind of franchise league type thing happening for a while. It seems like it may be that they'll actually try to be somewhat open for at least the first year or something like that. That seems like their approach, and we're seeing all kinds of little Valorant tournaments pop up here or there, and I would be surprised if we don't see, because it doesn't seem like there's a limitation. I would be surprised if we don't see a lot of TOs like being very interested in running Valorant stuff, because the game will be much easier to sell, and so therefore it'll be a lot more cost effective, and it'll be much more beneficial for your portfolio as a company providing like a tournament than running another CSGO tournament, which you've done a bunch of times. And I kind of look at the majors like that too, because one of the ways you can justify a loss-making project is by being able to show that you can actually execute something of that scale. And if you've already done it a few times, then, well, it's going to have diminishing returns. Like the value will have diminishing returns in that sense. So you won't need to run the major anymore. You won't need to prove that you can do it. You've already done that. So if it makes less sense financially, and that other incentive is also diminishing, there is definitely a world where if there's only like 3 people left who are interested in even running them, but they can't justify it financially, and you have something like Valorant where you could invest money in that, which would be way easier to sell and way better for your portfolio. It feels like you would want to do that. So that would also be like a smart thing for Riot Games if they want to try to take away some of the kind of market share that CSGO has in terms of viewership and streams and so on and so forth. So that's I don't know if that's something that they've thought about or not, or what how exactly that's going to work. But Valorant definitely is a looming threat in terms of it can really serve to compound the issues CSGO has. Like any grievances people have with CSGO, it's such an interesting experience to go over to Valorant and be like, oh, they fixed this. This isn't an issue. Like it's such an easy comparison point because the game is so similar. I've had a lot of moments like that when I like jumped into Valorant. Is that something that you've been experiencing as well?
Yeah, it kind of just feels like polar opposites right now. Like even all their updates that Valorant do, I'm just like, okay, this is actually really good. There's no mistakes in here. There's nothing like, there's no other bugs from this. Like it actually seems pretty good. And like even the issues I was having maybe at the beginning, like I felt that there was a lot of cheaters that kind of all seem to be eradicated right now, and kind of like just with how they communicate with the community, it's just after being like playing CS and just having multiple, just growing up on CS, and it's just so refreshing just having this game organizer that actually just like openly talks about everything and kind of, I don't know, it's so alien to me to have it. It's really quite enjoyable.
Well, on that note, we will switch over to part 2 of the Sliggy podcast, the Sliggy appearance on the DDK show, as we will start to dive into our Valorant discussion.